And this is the hero's journey, the part of the hero's journey where you meet guides, you meet allies, you meet maybe mentors, and you meet spiritual friends that will lead you forward, that will actually support you going forward in the practice, that will actually challenge you in going forward in the practice. And it basically means that somebody who has walked the path before you, that they've climbed up to the mountain, metaphorical mountaintop, and they are coming down. They're on the return journey and meet you as you're going up in one way or another. And they can help you because they know the path. They know the steps that you need to take on the journey. They know the pitfalls that you will find on the journey. They know the dead ends that you're going to run into on the journey. They know the wrong turns that you're going to run into the journey. And in that sense, they can actually be a great ally, a great support for you on your path. And all good allies, guides, mentors, teachers, spiritual friends that we meet on our path, in one sense, we could look at them as a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva, for those who don't know, is basically a person who is awakened. It's a Buddhist ideal of not just awakening for our own benefit, so we kind of escape all the suffering and the rounds and rounds of suffering that humanity goes through, but we awaken, and in part and parcel of that awakening is that I have to help other people. This is so valuable. My life has been transformed by this. In one way or another, you can sell pencils and help other people awaken, or you can maybe even, actively help people, set yourself up as a teacher or whatever, help them to awaken. But there's the intention is the Bodhisattva's vow, is that I won't be satisfied until all of humanity, all of sentient beings actually awaken to the point where it alleviates suffering that all human beings have. So that's what a bodhisattva is. And that teachers will always have that kind of taste, that flavor. Teacher, guide, ally, a spiritual friend. The spiritual path is almost the spiritual path. When you cross the threshold, you enter into the inner path of development. It is almost always counterintuitive. That means that almost all the time, what you feel like you should be doing or what you feel like you shouldn't be doing is not exactly correct. Because often in our meditation practice, in our spiritual development, we might evaluate, oh my God, the practice is going so good right now. We'll be happy and joyful and, peak experiences and everything. But it's so easy to become attached to those. And it feels like, no, this is good. I want more of this. But actually the attachment is kind of counterproductive. Or we might feel that the practice is going really, really, suddenly it's falling apart. Suddenly I'm feeling heavy. Suddenly it's like, I was concentrated before and now the concentration's falling apart. And we might evaluate that and it's unpleasant. It feels bad in the body. It feels bad in the mind. I have all these negative thoughts coming up. We might evaluate that as something's wrong with our practice. But that's actually good because it could usually, it indicates a forward development. It indicates progress in the practice. And for the yogi, for the meditator, for the person walking that path, the tendency is to misevaluate because it's counterintuitive. If it was intuitive, if it wasn't counterintuitive, if it was intuitive, everybody would be awake because we go out, no, I'm going to follow what I want to do, and that's going to wake me up. But it doesn't kind of work that way. So we stop doing what we want to do and we start kind of, maybe delay that gratification, have a higher intention, and start listening to what's happening in the process and stay with the process moment by moment by moment, in a way phenomenologically, just relating to the phenomena that's arising rather than evaluating it and saying, oh no, this is good or this is bad. It's counterintuitive. Now, having a guide and having an ally, a spiritual friend or a mentor, while you're going through this process and saying, wait a second, what you're going through is actually, what I see is positive development here. So when you look at this, look at it a little, change the way you look at it, change the way you practice, change the attitude you have toward it, and see what happens. A good guide, a good practice, a good ally is always going to help us look at things slightly differently to understand that this is actually development. Why? Because development is usually counterintuitive. So that's that's what a good guide ally does. And there's always the way that as we enter the inner path of meditation, the way that a guide, an ally, a spiritual friend, or a teacher may work with you or relate with you is always going to be a beautiful balance of challenge and support. A beautiful balance, like a yin-yang balance of challenge and support. Sometimes they may be more on the challenge side, but there'll be support there always. Sometimes they may be more on the support side, but there'll be challenge there always. But if there's just too much challenge and not enough support, then it can turn out being harsh and cold and maybe even a little bit damaging, a little bit too tough, not enough love. On the other hand, if it's too supportive, if there's too much support and not enough challenge, then it can be too coddling and create kind of this codependent thing, and that's also not conducive to development on your path. So there always has to be this beautiful challenge and support. And it's difficult actually for the people walking the path each and every step. It's difficult for us to evaluate if this is a challenge or support moment. But having an external guide, an external support net can be very helpful. It can actually save us so much time. In fact, years of kind of wasted time in our practice. There is no such thing as wasted time in our practice, but there is a path that leads forward, and there are lots of pitfalls and dead ends, and that everybody does. The sooner that we learn from those pitfalls and dead ends and quote unquote mistakes, the better our practice will kind of align with the forward direction. Having outside a guide for that is super, super helpful. But most importantly, an external guide, an ally, a mentor, or a spiritual friend on the path. They know that the most important thing is that nobody can walk the path for you. Nobody can walk the path for you. You have to walk it all by yourself. But paradoxically, they also know that it is almost impossible to walk it alone. So nobody can walk it for you. Nobody can walk it for me. Nobody can walk it for us. We must take those steps on our own. Nobody can take those steps for us. But it is almost impossible to do it alone. And that's why we always meet the inner guide. We always meet a guide, an ally, a mentor, a spiritual friend when we commit to the inner path of practice. It's kind of what do you say, built into the human spiritual genetic code that, when seekers are out there seeking, that somehow they find each other, and that's just how it is. There's a beautiful story from Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was this amazing spiritual teacher from the beginning of last century to the middle of last century, and he was seeking. He was a Russian guy that, anyways, long story, I won't go into it, but he was going all around the world when he was a young seeker before he became a teacher who guided others. He was seeking all through the world, Eurasia, basically, Europe and Asia, to find spiritual awakening. And he met a man who was a prince. He was a Russian prince who had given up everything, given up his aristocratic lifestyle, and started to become a seeker too. And these two guys, they recognized each other, and they became the greatest spiritual companions. And for years, they went from teacher to teacher, from tradition to tradition, from monastery to monastery, seeking, and they were really deeply, deeply bonded as spiritual brothers. And then one day they were sitting in a tea shop in Cairo or someplace like that, and a man walked in, and he looked at the prince, and he called him by his childhood name, which nobody knew. And the prince was blown away. How did you know that? And he says, look, I've come to find you. I know you're a seeker. You have to come with me. I'm going to take you to what you're looking for. And Gurdjieff got up to go, and the guy said, no, you can't come. It's only him. So they had to say goodbye. But because they were committed to their higher path, they were like deeply bonded brothers. But because they were committed to their higher path, they said goodbye. And the prince disappeared, and then Gurdjieff went on for years seeking, until one day, years later, he came finally to the place he was, some monastery that was hidden deep in the mountains of Eurasia. And he went in, and who did he find? He found the prince. He was there, and he had been there for a long time. And he was, just as Gurdjieff arrived, the prince was leaving. And they met each other one more time. And it was like, oh my God, and the prince supported him, and he was in his heart the whole time. And to be able to meet him again lifted Gurdjieff so much. And the prince said to Gurdjieff, I'm leaving. You have to stay. And this is going to be the last time that we ever meet. And it was like a bittersweet moment. He loved him deeply. He got to meet him again in this kind of place of spiritual sanctuary, but they were passing each other. And then the prince said to Gurdjieff, and this is the final words of their meeting, he said, you have finally come to the place where the deepest desire of your heart can become the reality of your being. Stay here. Stay here and practice until you have developed a force within you that is strong enough. And then when it's strong, you go back to the world where you're going to be met with forces that will constantly show you your place. This was the final teaching of his spiritual friend, his guide. He left and he never saw him again. So this is a beautiful story. And we have these amazing stories throughout human culture of these types of spiritual allies and guides and friends along the higher path of practice. Look at Luke Skywalker. Who did he meet? Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Obi-Wan Kenobi gave him his spiritual weapon. He gave him the attitudes. He gave him the whole concept of the Force. He taught Luke how to use it. And as they cross the threshold into the unknown, the first thing that happens was Obi-Wan Kenobi gets killed down. And Luke is left on his own. And he can't handle it, but he does his best. But he has the teachings. He met Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was gone, and Luke went on to become, a great Jedi later. There's also the story of Rumi. Everybody knows Rumi. He was an amazing, heart-opening poet, actually spiritually realized man, who his spiritual expression was to write poetry again and again. He just wrote more and more beautiful, profound poems of non-duality. And his poems were in many ways written to Shams of Tabriz. Shams of Tabriz was his spiritual mentor, his guide, his ally, his spiritual friend, who he had deep communion with, but he met him only once on his path. Shams came into town. He met Rumi. Rumi was already some kind of spiritual teacher. He had a little bit of a community, but he was nothing special. They met, and through their meeting, he became deeply, deeply, deeply awakened. And in that awakening, he realized non-duality. He realized the absolute. And then Shams left. They were together for about a month. And then Shams left, never to be seen again. But Rumi, every time he awakened to the absolute, every time he would drop into a deeper state, meditative state of non-duality, of the absolute, for him, he was meeting Shams, because Shams was the external representation of that divine state, and he helped Rumi awaken to that divine state. And when he would drop in to that divine state, for him, he was meeting Shams. And he had the greatest devotion to that state, of which the external representation was Shams of Tabriz. And he wrote a beautiful poem. He wrote many, hundreds of beautiful poems. But one poem, he says, look at my eyes. They are small. No. Hang on, how did he say? Yeah, look at my eyes. No, he said, how can this great... No, got it. I am small. How can this great love be inside of me? Look at my eyes. They see enormous things. When you feel your lips becoming infinite and sweet, like the moon in the sky, you will know that Shams of Tabriz is there too. So basically what he said is every time you touch the infinite, you touch the sweet taste of the absolute, you will know that you're also meeting Shams. Because the deepest truth in me, and the deepest truth in you, and the deepest truth in Rumi, and the deepest truth in every spiritual being is the same deepest truth. It's the same. And that's where you and I and all the history of men and women who are spiritually realized are one. That's where we all come together. And that's fundamentally what a spiritual teacher does. My own teacher, a man named Sayadaw U Pandita, he was a meditation teacher who I practiced with deeply in Burma for a few years. I was on retreat with him. He led me, he initiated me into the meditative path, and he led me through the progressive insight and initiated me into that tradition. And I have nothing but, have nothing and had nothing but the greatest respect, admiration, and gratitude for his life, which transformed my life. And he died about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. But I remember upon hearing the news of his death, I knew he was sick. He was sick for a while, so I knew it was coming. But when I heard, boom, I just turned in and I dropped into the deepest experience inside of me. And Sayadaw U Pandita was there too. That is who he was for me, that deepest state. And he was an external representation, a living representation of the infinite, a living representation of the absolute, a kind of a non-compromising teacher, that through the practice that he guided me through, what he was teaching awakened in me internally. And at that point, the external guide, the external mentor, the external teacher, the external spiritual friend became internalized. And that's the whole point of meeting spiritual friends. Now, I did talk about 10 phases of the hero's journey, and we're only on phase number 4, from answering the call to having your spiritual weapons, to crossing the threshold and entering the inner path of meditation, and then meeting the spiritual guides, allies, spiritual friends, and mentors along the path. From there, we have to go through, once we've kind of entered that realm, then we go through trials and tribulations, difficulties in the path, because our path becomes super powered by those things, and we go through trials and tribulations. Then we go through a period of the dark night of the soul, where things really start to kind of break down and the self goes through a dissolution. Then there is an attainment, a stage of awakening to that realization. In Joseph Campbell's hero's journey phase, it's kind of like, stealing the fire, like Prometheus went down into the depths of hold and captured the fire. Then there's the return journey, and part of that return journey is atoning for our sins, dare I say sins, I don't really use that word too much, but we go through a period of atonement where we start to heal. That which wasn't resolved in the past must be faced, must be worked with, must be healed. That's part of the return spiritual journey. Then there's actually returning into the marketplace. How do we integrate all of this practice back into some type of daily life, with sex and drugs and rock and roll and money and families and marriage and divorce and life and death and babies and old people, and we got to integrate everything back into that. That's there's a lot to this path. And then the final stage of the hero's journey is bestowing our gifts upon the world, where we actually turn around, we're able to help others in that process. So those are the stages of the hero's journey, and today we just spoke about one, which was recognizing allies, guides, and spiritual friends on the path of practice. And again, the reason I chose this topic today, any one of those stages of the hero's journey is really, really beautiful teachings and beautiful practice to go into. But the reason I chose this one today is because I'm teaching this phase starting next month. Actually starting on Sunday. It's the beginning of this phase of our discovery cycle in my meditation program called the Meditation Discovery Cycle. Now, I will say one more thing about mentors and guides on the path, and this one's going to be specifically about teachers. So what I'd like to finish with is the Buddha's advice for spiritual teachers. Yeah, and he has 5 qualities. There's 5 qualities of a spiritual teacher that is a nice kind of guidelines for what a teacher should be, or a guide, or a mentor. And the first one is that they should be lovable. That there's just something about the teacher, something about the guide, something about the mentor that is lovable, that you're drawn to them. It doesn't matter if it's a yoga teacher, an Aikido teacher, a coach, a therapist, a high school gym teacher, or a meditation teacher. It doesn't really matter. If they're teaching a higher path of development, loving them, when they're lovable, it's helpful. They could be a tough teacher, but there's still something lovable about them. They could be a sweet teacher, but there's still something lovable about them. So quality number 1 is that they are lovable. Quality number 2 is that they are worthy of the love that you put on them. And what does that mean? That means that they're morally and ethically have a high standard, that they're not breaking moral rules and they're not breaking ethical rules, that they're really kind of teaching in a clean way. No kind of ulterior motives or side agendas to get in, but just teaching for the purpose of the person that they're, for the benefit of the person that's being guided. So first is that they're lovable. Number 2 is that they are worthy of love. Krista. Hi, Krista. How are you? Welcome. Again, I just want to say, before I finish these 5 qualities, if anybody has any questions, write them in the chat. I will bring them in. Or if you have any comments, we can start some type of little dialogue that way. So, 5 qualities of a spiritual teacher, according to the Buddha. Number 1, they are lovable. Number 2, they are worthy of that love because they have a moral standard that they adhere to. They are worthy of love. Number 3, that they are deeply experienced in practice and theory. That they've practiced deeply and that they've studied deeply. So there's a balance. So there's a theoretical or philosophical framework that holds the deeper, in this case, meditative process. So number 1, they're lovable. Number 2, they are worthy of the love. Number 3, they are deeply experienced in practice and theory. Number 4, and this is an interesting one, they can say hard things. They can say things that are difficult to hear. Now, this has 2 meanings. The first one, they can take the profound Dharma and speak about it in a way that's easy for the listener to comprehend. So they can speak about difficult things. They can say something that's really, really complex and, wow, it's like, well, how do you know that? But they can speak about it in a way where the listener can actually take it in and get it. Number 2, the second part of this, that they can say difficult things, is that when it's time to hold your feet to the fire, they hold your feet to the fire. They don't take it easy on you. That means basically tough love. When you need a tough truth, a truth teacher can actually give it to you. Now, they give it to you in a way that you can receive it, of course, but they can speak about what's hard. Normally I'm in denial, I can't hear it. They can do that. They can get it in there. Cool, huh? So this is the first 4 of the 5 qualities of a meditation teacher, spiritual teacher. Number 1, that they are lovable. Number 2, that they're worthy of love. Number 3, they're deeply experienced in both practice and theory. Number 4, they can speak profound things. And that's 2 parts. 1, they can say profound things in a way that's easier for the listener to get. Or if they need to put their finger on some tough love, they can give the tough love. And number 5, the 5th quality of a spiritual teacher, according to the Buddha, is that they only offer teachings for the benefit of the listener. So in other words, they don't say it for their benefit. for their fame. They don't say it for their success. They don't say it for their wealth, to get rich. Hey, I'm going to teach you. Give me money. They don't. Nope. They don't say it for some type of favors. Why don't you come paint my house for me? Or they don't say it for sexual favors to impress somebody so they can get them in the sack, so to speak. All those things happen. There's lots of examples of that out there in the world, and we should be aware of that. But the highest quality of a spiritual teacher is that it's only for the benefit of the listener. So those are the 5 qualities of a spiritual teacher, a meditation teacher, a guide. And when we look at this topic, this 4th phase of the hero's journey in the meditation, on the path of meditation, from answering the call to getting your spiritual weapons, to crossing the threshold, and meeting guides, and meeting allies, meeting spiritual friends and mentors. These 5 qualities apply. That they are lovable, that they are worthy of the love, that they are deeply experienced in practice and theory, that they can say difficult things, speak the profound truth, and that they only offer teachings for the benefit of the listener. So that kind of wraps up the whole talk today about recognizing allies, guides, and spiritual friends along your path of practice. If anybody has any questions, I've got some time. Guy says, I'm guessing that it's not often that we meet people who fill these requirements. Yeah, Guy, it's actually not. In the old days, I think you and I'm guessing we're around the same age. I'm 58, actually. I know you have couple of small kids about the same age as mine. I think we started later in life. I certainly started, later in life with a family. But back in the day, we had to go look for those teachers. We had to get on a plane, a train, an automobile, and travel sometimes halfway around the world to meet such people. You might meet them in the local yoga studio or something like that, but you wanted to do deeper practice, you had to go far. And I did. I went to Japan. I lived in Japan for 8 years, and then I went to Burma, and I spent 2 years on retreat in Burma, another year on retreat in Nepal, because that's where I had to go to do the practice with those teachers. But these days, and that's still available, and it's still something that if anybody ever asks for my advice about that, I just encourage, if you've got the time and space in your life to do something like that, great. But today, with the world is just becoming smaller with the internet, we've got so much access to inspiring teachers. So, and not only inspiring teachers, but also inspiring communities. So, if you're looking, you will find them. And, if you guys if anybody watching this wants to come and check out our community, you can even jump in for a month. It's totally fine. And we'd love to have you. I do want to say that, as I was saying before, that this is it's kind of a warm up for the next phase of the discovery cycle, for my meditation discovery cycle program. If anybody is interested in that program, it's my monthly program where we actually meet twice a month, and then each week I'm sending out practice video. And as I said before, it's based on this phase. This year's discovery cycle is based on the 10 phases of the hero's journey. I just put the link in the comment section below so you can see that. Should be there. Oh, hang on. Well, I thought I put it there. There it is. Okay, so it's there. If you want to go over and check it out, it's a great course. We have a really great community, and it's reasonably priced. It's only $29 a month, and you can cancel anytime. So it's just for you to come in. There's tons of content, but you can join as much or as little as you like. And basically, I suppose the course may or may not be for you. Just as everybody has their preferences. But I can say that everybody who joins and engages the practice really starts to see the benefit of integrating a meditation practice into their daily lives. So it's all about a community of people that are supporting each other, as spiritual friends, and working through guidance through this process of meditation. So if anybody is interested in that, click the link below here, and we would love to have you. Krista says something very nice. Let's see what Krista says here. She says, I can honestly say that this program is that this is a worthwhile program. Miles is an awesome guide. Well, thank you, Krista. Okay, so now I'm going to give my dedication here at the end. So may this talk hopefully serve in some way to inspire you to practice, and may your practice lead you forward on your own hero's journey. May your practice lead you forward, maybe give you the inspiration and the tools and the techniques and the methods and the attitudes to cross the inner threshold, which is not easy to do, and enter the inner path, cross the threshold and enter the inner path of meditation. And may you meet spiritual friends, guides, mentors that will help you, empower you to face the difficulties of that inner path of practice. And may you go through what you need to go through and awaken and attain whatever needs to be attained, and return to the marketplace and offer your gifts to the world. And may that lead your practice forward, forever and always forward on your very own hero's journey.